Elena felt isolated, even though she was surrounded by a loving network of friends and her adoptive parents, who had always cared for her as if she were their own. Yet the questions in her heart had grown persistent over the years, like a faint hum that never quite subsided. Who were her biological parents? Why had they given her up? She remembered her mother's gentle reassurance as a child, explaining in soothing tones that when people were unable to care for a baby, sometimes adoption was the most loving choice. But Alina, now in her mid-20s, yearned to speak to the individuals who had brought her into the world, if only to see reflections of herself in their eyes. She had spent hours squinting at old records in libraries, scanning digital archives and connecting with specialized search groups for adoptees. On a warm afternoon, her laptop open on the long wooden table in the genealogical library, she came across a post by someone else searching for birth family information. The piece of text read, "Seeking birth parents from the southwestern region, 1990S adoption." It stopped her mid-screet. In that moment, Elena wondered if meeting this stranger who was on a path parallel to her own might lessen her sense of isolation. The genealogical library held a quiet hush, broken only by the rustle of pages and the low hum of an overhead projector. She looked around for where she might find the person who had posted that listing. On the corner table, a man with warm brown eyes was typing into his phone. He checked the search group online under the same thread she had just viewed. She recognized his profile picture from the post. Summoning courage that felt newly kindled, she walked over. "Hi," Elena said softly, trying not to disturb the others. "I saw your post in the adoptees forum. Are you researching your birth family too?" He looked up. His expression was marked by kindness, and the corners of his eyes crinkled in what might have been relief. "Yes, I am. My name's Matteo," he said, extending a hand. "I came here today hoping to find more about where my birth mother originated. Wasn't sure I'd meet anyone else on the same path." Elena smiled and introduced herself. It felt strangely comforting to say her real name to someone she knew shared the same sense of not quite knowing where they belonged. The conversation flowed freely from that point, as if each recognized a missing part of themselves mirrored in the other's confusion. They decided to collaborate. Two sets of eyes were better than one. In the days that followed, Elena and Matteo discovered that their adoption scenarios were remarkably parallel. Both had been born in the same state, just a few years apart. Each had documents that included only partial information: first names of parents, birth hospital, and the adoption agency. It struck them as uncanny. Over coffee in the library cafe, they pored over forms that bore water stains and typewriter ink. Their bitterness or resentment toward the mysteries of their origins seemed to lighten when they were together. On one late afternoon, after several hours of searching, Elena felt frustration welling. Many of the leads turned out to be dead ends, unreachable phone numbers, addresses that no longer existed. She fought tears as she closed yet another tab on the genealogical website. But Matteo's presence was a balm. He silently slid over a cup of tea, resting his hand on her shoulder. She was grateful he knew better than to press her for words. "You know," he began softly, "I almost gave up looking once. I thought, what's the point? I have a life now, a loving family. Maybe I should leave the past in the past. But that feeling, that emptiness, it doesn't go away unless we face these questions." Elena's eyes glistened. "I've thought the same thing, but it keeps me up at night sometimes. Not so much anger as a need to understand. I imagine what my mother must have felt like leaving me, or my dad if he knew about me. It's been so long now, but the questions still loom." He took her hands in his. "We'll figure it out together." They began to translate that hopeful statement into action. Matteo organized the documents they had: Elena's adoption records, his own non-identifying information, and an old genealogical tree placeholder for her side. He was more methodical of the two, outlining possible steps, color-coding leads, and allocating tasks. Elena, in turn, drew from her empathy and compassion. She'd often encourage him to contact people who might have known his birth mother, and she was adept at forging connections online. They became a seamless team, unafraid to pursue even the smallest clue. Within a month, they discovered that an address tied to Elena's birth mother was in a small town on the outskirts of Mullins County, several hours away. It was the only house that might link to the handful of details in Elena's file. The excitement was dizzying. Though the address was dated from 20 some years ago, any trace of her birth mother could be valuable. Matteo insisted they go there together, not just out of solidarity, but because he was hoping that by traveling beyond their home city, they might bump into new leads for his own search. They arranged to take a long weekend. Elena felt a strange thrill. The possibility of revelation made her heart feel like it was fluttering in her chest. They headed out early on a Friday, the trunk of Matteo's car brimming with documents, a printed map, and 2 duffel bags of clothes. The hours on the highway were filled with conversation more intimate than they had ever shared with anyone else. As the landscape sped past rolling hills, isolated gas stations, farmland, Elena recounted her adoption day. She pressed her palm against the car window, her voice hushed yet certain. My adoptive parents always said they held me in their arms at the agency and fell in love on the spot. They said I was so quiet. She laughed softly at the memory. But I used to imagine my biological mother standing behind a one-way mirror, watching me for the last time. I have no idea if that's true. My mom might not even have been on the premises, but I've always pictured her there, wanting one final glimpse. Matteo reached over and squeezed her hand. That's truly touching. My adoptive parents had a similar story about me sleeping in my father's arms as they signed the paperwork. It's funny how that's our origin story with the families that raised us. But it's only one part. The miles ticked by, and soon a sense of anticipation and trepidation filled the car as they entered Mullins County. The small downtown area was a scattering of quaint brick buildings, a diner, and an old-fashioned general store. Their first stop was the address that might lead to Elena's birth mother. They pulled onto a gravel driveway leading to a modest, weathered house with a porch out front. A large oak tree stood by the side, shading the yard. Before stepping out, Elena's breath quivered, and Matteo placed his hand on her shoulder. She nodded, feeling the wave of support flow through her. A middle-aged woman answered the door. She introduced herself as Mrs. Caldwell. Though clearly puzzled by these 2 strangers, her demeanor was polite. Elena explained that her mother, or someone linked to her mother, might have lived there 2 decades ago. Mrs. Caldwell hesitated before replying, I bought this place 15 years back. The previous owner was an elderly man named Donovan. He passed away and I bought it from his family. She shook her head sympathetically. I'm sorry, I don't recall anything about a young woman living here. Maybe the records down at City Hall could tell you more. It was another blank wall, another uncertain path. While Alina tried hard not to cry, Mrs. Caldwell suggested they speak to Mr. Ridgway at the diner across the street. He's lived here all his life, knows everyone, she said. If there was someone renting a room, or a caretaker, or a guest, he might have heard something, so they walked to the diner. They found Mr. Ridgway sipping coffee in a corner booth. Elena and Matteo introduced themselves again, explaining their search. The old man sipped quietly, his tired eyes flicking over them, trying to piece together their request. When Elena unearthed a small black and white photograph taken from the adoption agency file, an unremarkable snapshot of a woman from behind, the only identifying detail in the entire folder, Mr. Ridgway squinted. I remember Donovan used to rent his back room, he said. A few folks over the years, but that picture is so vague, just the back of a woman's head. Could be anyone. He paused, tapping his knobby fingers on the table. Though, now that I think about it, there was a girl named Caroline. I think that was her name, who stayed with Donovan a while. She helped him care for his wife, who was sick. This must have been, close to the mid-90s. Then she left. Didn't see her again. Alina's heart jumped into her throat. Caroline was her birth mother's name. Or at least that was one of the names in her records. It was the first real fragment of proof that matched. She felt a tingling across her skin. Trying to still her voice, she asked if he knew anything else. Mr. Ridgway scratched his chin, serious concentration knitting his brow. I think she was heading east at some point. She took a bus, or so I heard. Left quite suddenly. Maybe she had family in that direction? Or maybe she was searching for a job? Hard to recall. You'll want to check the old bus depot logs, might be something there about her departure, if they kept records. They thanked him profusely, leaving the diner with a small spark of hope. Though the exact thread of Caroline's life remained elusive, at least Elena knew she hadn't imagined the potential of her mother's presence in that town. Standing outside in the midday sun, Matteo asked softly, "Are you okay?" Elena nodded, tears brimming. "I feel a bit relieved, to be honest, even though this is still so incomplete, but I'm also anxious. We're close. Or maybe that's just wishful thinking." "Hey," he said, offering a tentative smile, "we've made progress, you know. We'll keep following the clues. This might lead us exactly where we need to go." They decided to stay in town for the night, renting a room above a local B&B. After dinner, they strolled under the starlight, each lost in thoughts of what could be waiting around the next corner. Elena found herself talking about more than her search for her birth mother. She told Matteo about her secret longing when she was younger, wanting a sibling, wanting to share a bond with someone who had the same coloring, the same shape of nose, or the same odd laugh. Although her adoptive family had loved her dearly, she always felt different, a piece of the puzzle missing. Matteo listened quietly, then confessed that a part of him was also searching for connection, not just facts. He believed that if his birth mother ever wanted to see him again, he would welcome her with open arms, wanting to fill in all the scattered pieces. If not, at least he might gain an understanding of where he came from. They lingered by a small pond, the moonlight reflecting in gentle ripples. A comfortable silence enveloped them. Elena looked at him with gratitude. "You make all this less lonely," she whispered. He gently brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. "Same for me. I think, well, you give me courage. I'd forgotten how alone I felt doing this on my own." As the night breeze drifted around them, Elena felt something shift, an unspoken recognition that what they shared now was more than mutual curiosity. The closeness between them had evolved into tenderness, each dependent on the other's warmth to navigate the murky path ahead. She didn't say anything more, but her heart pulsed with a gentle excitement. In the following days, they visited the old bus station, rummaged through dusty logs, and made calls to out-of-service numbers. The results were inconclusive, but they gleaned the possibility that Caroline might have traveled farther east to Polk Springs or beyond. Though not wholly satisfying, they decided that was the next clue to chase. In between their quest for Elena's history, Matteo's search continued. He had discovered that, though the adoption agency was the same for both of them, his file contained more concrete information about his birth mother's name, which was Teresa, and her possible last known location. Late one afternoon, he showed Elena a file stating that Teresa had once worked as a nurse at a community clinic in the city. The record was several decades old, but it was a starting point. They resolved to go back home, gather more funds and time off, and then continue traveling. Their return journey took on the hushed excitement of possibility. Along the way, Elena found herself wanting to prolong their hours together. At the final rest stop before the city, they lingered over coffee, reluctant to part. She realized that what they were doing was more than just an investigation. They were quietly forging a bond, as though each day their hearts held one another's weariness and hope. That night, after dropping Elena at her apartment, Matteo walked her to the door and paused. The street lamp cast a soft glow on them. They shared a look that seemed charged with the weight of everything they had uncovered, as well as the silent knowledge that something deeper was growing between them. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently to hers, and she could feel his breath, the slow, calm warmth of it. They didn't kiss that evening, but the intimacy in that moment was as powerful as any embrace. Each retreated inside their homes with a flutter of anticipation about how their separate pains were drawing them into love. The following weeks brought more revelations. Through community directories and old hospital rosters, Matteo located a woman who had once known Teresa. She had since moved 2 hours south. He arranged a phone call, quickly discovering that this old acquaintance remembered Teresa quite fondly, and apparently Teresa had occasionally mentioned having given up a child years before. The conversation was guarded but promising. Matteo felt his heart pounding as the woman answered his questions. He gleaned tiny details. Teresa was from a big family, might have traveled to work overseas at one point, still carried a photo of her baby. The fact that she kept that photo all these years made Matteo's heart swell. He wondered if she had always held hope of seeing him again. Meanwhile, Elena expanded her search. She posted new details online about Caroline's possible route, referencing Donovan's house, the Mullins County bus station logs, and a partial screenshot from the adoption records. The more she dug, the more the trail seemed both tangible and maddeningly incomplete. One evening, Elena sat at her laptop, her eyes burning from hours of staring at the screen. Suddenly, her email pinged. She opened a message from an unknown address. "I might have information about Caroline. Please call me." A phone number followed. Heart hammering, she forwarded it to Matteo to keep him in the loop, then dialed. A woman answered. The woman introduced herself as a volunteer genealogist who specialized in adoptee searches. She had come across Elena's post and recognized some details from her own research. The genealogist believed that a Caroline fitting Elena's description might have eventually settled near Polk Springs, had a brief relationship, and possibly left behind references to having placed a child for adoption. Some of this was rumor, as the genealogist had never confirmed it, but she was willing to help Elena find more. Elena's breath shuddered in her chest. This felt like the moment she had longed for, someone with real leads. She made arrangements to drive out to Polk Springs that weekend. Instinctively, her first act after hanging up was to call Matteo. He answered, and she could hear the excitement in his voice. "That's incredible, Elena," he said. "I'll come with you, unless you'd rather go alone." "No," she replied, voice trembling with relief. "I might need you there to keep me grounded. This is too big to face alone." 2 days later, they were driving down yet another unfamiliar stretch of highway. As they passed farmland, Elena noticed how her hand was laced with Matteo's. Each realized that what began as a pragmatic alliance might be turning into a shared dream of future belonging. They arrived at Polk Springs, a modest town with only a single main street. They met the volunteer genealogist, who took them to a local historical society building, rummaging through birth indexes, newspaper clippings, and property records. The genealogist pointed out references to a Caroline Sweeney, who had briefly lived there, working in housekeeping at a small motel, but had left in a hurry. According to the genealogist, Caroline might have confided to a coworker that she had given up her baby years ago, and she was feeling immense guilt. The coworker's name was Angela Simmons, who still lived in Polk Springs. They found Angela's address and knocked on her door at twilight. A woman in her 50s answered, her eyes crinkling at the corners with every blink, as though she carried memories both warm and painful. Gently, Elena asked if Angela had known a Caroline Sweeney, or if she recalled details of her life at that time. Angela's expression turned guarded, tinged with compassion. "Yes, I knew Caroline," she replied after a pause. "She was a kind person, but she carried sorrows in her eyes. She told me she had a baby once, but said she gave her child up to give them a better life. She agonized over it, talked about wanting to find her daughter, but she feared rejection." Elena's hand flew to her mouth, tears gathering. She tried to compose herself. "I need to know, did she mention where she might be living now, or if she's alive?" Angela looked pained. "I'm not certain. Eventually, Caroline moved on. She said something about heading north near the border to see if she could get a fresh start. That was the last I heard. But from what I understood, she mentioned she might reach out to the adoption agency if she mustered the courage. Her mother had wanted to find her. Her mother had wanted to find her. Even if that desire had never materialized, the knowledge that she was on her mother's mind all these years was deeply healing. Matteo reached for Elena's hand, steadying her as the swirl of emotions threatened to overtake her. They thanked Angela, who assured them she was sorry she couldn't provide more direct contact information. Standing on the porch in the cooling twilight, Elena turned to Matteo, tears streaming silently. She never forgot me, she managed. She wanted to find me. That's enough for now. It means she loved me, right? Matteo brushed her tears away gently. Absolutely, he said, drawing her closer. She loved you. There's no doubt about that. In that moment, Elena clung to him, burying her face against his warm shoulder. The weight of everything, relief, heartbreak, gratitude, pressed into her. Slowly, he moved his hand under her chin, guiding her gaze upward. And this time there was no hesitation. Softly, with infinite tenderness, he kissed her. She melted into that simple reassurance amid the swirl of her emotions. This was a kiss that said, "You're not alone. We'll keep searching together." They drove back to their motel in near silence, words unnecessary after the profound moment they had shared. Inside the quiet room, they settled on the edge of the bed, fingers interlaced. Matteo offered her a small, hopeful grin. "This journey still isn't finished," he said. "But I believe we'll find them. You'll find Caroline and I'll find Teresa. Each new clue leads us closer." Elena nodded, her heart brimming with more hope than ever before. "And no matter how long it takes, we have each other now." In the days that followed, they returned home, continuing to hunt for data. Elena, buoyed by Angela's testimony, wrote letters to nearby adoption agencies in the north. She left message after message, searching for any sign that Caroline had approached them. Meanwhile, Matteo pressed on with his own quest, scheduling a meeting with Teresa's acquaintance who might pinpoint a more current location for her. All the while, their bond strengthened. They went on walks by the river, took breaks from their research by dancing in Elena's living room, or sometimes cooked dinner at Matteo's place for a semblance of normality. Their parallel quests transformed into part of the fabric of their newfound love. Both recognized that, even if they never uncovered every piece of their past, the present they were building together was rich and meaningful. On a bright morning, Matteo called Elena with thrilling news. The acquaintance had finally connected him to a phone number for Teresa. It was outdated, but he was determined to follow every avenue. A few days later, Elena received correspondence from an adoption liaison near the border indicating that someone named Caroline Sweeney had indeed written them a while back. The letter was never followed up, but they provided an address. Immediately, Elena felt her heart surge with renewed hope. They agreed to set out again, side by side, in search of closure, truth, and the families they had never known. Yet this time, the journey felt transformative, because they were traveling as more than just collaborators. Their hearts were intertwined, sharing a tenderness born from understanding the universal longing for belonging. While the complexities of the past lay scattered like a puzzle, they were determined to piece it together, no matter how long it took. That evening, over a simple dinner, Elena gazed at Matteo with a warmth that suffused every corner of her being. "I never imagined I could feel so safe during such an uncertain time. Thank you for that." He took her hand, pressing a soft kiss to her fingertips. "I'm grateful we found each other in all this. Sometimes I wonder if maybe we were meant to. Our searches introduced us, but it's bigger than that now." She smiled, heart swelling with affection. Indeed, it had become bigger than that. In their pursuit of origins, they had created a new bond that could anchor them when the world felt shaky. The puzzle of their births, the missing mothers, the yet unknown fathers, Even if those answers remained elusive a while longer, they had found each other. And in that, they discovered a new sense of belonging that finally quieted the loneliness in their souls. Long after the dinner plates were cleared and the light in the window faded, they stood together in the hush of the night. Elena leaned into Mateo's embrace, her ear near the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Their breath joined in gentle synchronization, and she felt utterly present in that moment. She looked up, her eyes filled with resolve. "You and I," she whispered, "will keep going until we find them." Mateo stroked her hair. "No more searching alone," he murmured. "Whatever answers or heartbreaks may come, we're in this together. And that gives me more courage than I ever thought possible." They pressed their foreheads together, hearts joined in a vow that did not require words. Whatever shape the future took, whether their birth families would welcome them or remain at a distance, whether their mothers were waiting with open arms or consumed by regret, Elena and Mateo knew they had found something irreplaceable in one another, and that knowledge calmed the restless yearning that had long haunted them. Their respective puzzles, each an array of half-formed shapes, might eventually reveal the story of who they were and where they came from. But their love, forged on this quest, was a promise that they would never face the uncertainty alone again.